Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is the last of the four workshops. So on this workshop, we are going to be going through product development and the final phases of the design process. Hopefully you've had a really enjoyable week, and yeah, one last workshop to go through, and hopefully it's going to be very, very useful and insightful for you. So you've probably already seen this from the first workshop on Monday, but just a little bit about me. My name is Tom, and I'm a designer, and I'm the founder of Little Mammoth. And we design products, services, and experiences. And I'm here to help give an insight into the design process. What are we here to do? So in today's sessions, we are going to learn about NPD, and we're going to hopefully develop your ideas, and then give you the tools and some resources to help you complete your workbook. Hopefully all then culminating in you snapping up the Longitude Explorer Prize. You're going to need a few things. You're going to be able to need to hear me. Ideally, you're going to be able to need to speak to your other group members if you're watching this. But again, don't worry if you can't. You can kind of fill out all the workshop materials and templates individually. Hopefully, you've had a chance to select a concept to develop, and that might be your concept from the capture sheet that we filled out at worksheet 5 on the first session, or it might be your idea that you kind of submitted as a finalist of the Longitude Explorer Prize. We're going to need worksheets 6 and 7, and we're going to need some pens, and hopefully you've had a chance to have a hunt around in the house and to see if you've been able to kind of pull together as many prototyping materials as you can. Again, it's going to be a relatively fast-paced workshop, so hopefully you're kind of super energized and raring to go. So what we're going to cover in the first session, in this session. So we're going to go through the product development process and all the stages involved in that final stage. We're going to look at the external team resources and look at all the people that can help you along that process and what they do. We're going to go through some prototyping methods, and we're going to essentially kind of try to help you choose the most appropriate method for your project. We're then going to go through an exercise that helps you to plan your prototyping. It's really important to make sure that we plan that phase, and essentially it's just kind of trying to figure out what you want to learn from prototyping. We're then also going to go through some user testing methods, and we're going to do another planning exercise with you to help you to figure out what kind of questions you might want to ask your users when you're kind of going through that user testing. And we're going to have a Q&A session. Unfortunately, for this recorded session, that functionality won't be here. So where are we in the process? So you recognize this diagram from workshop 1, and this is essentially kind of the design process and what we go through, the double diamond. And we've gone through the discover phase, the define phase, and the develop phase. We've framed our problem. We've learned about our users. We've created a design brief, and hopefully you've had a chance to do that in between the sessions. And we've come up with lots of great ideas, and hopefully we've selected a single concept to then start to kind of deliver and to improve. And so we're at that stage where we're at the cusp of the deliver phase, and we're then narrowing down our focus. We're going to try to essentially kind of get to a single design solution at the end of the deliver phase. So just a little bit more about what we do in the deliver phase. Essentially, deliver phase is all about the refinement of our ideas. Within that process, we make lots and lots of prototypes. We conduct user testing, and all trying to help us to kind of to improve our concept and kind of essentially kind of create the best possible solution that we can think of. Within this deliver phase, we need to evaluate against the design brief as well. So we need to kind of test our ideas and make sure that it's actually kind of ticking all the boxes. And finally, we need to kind of get to a stage where we can select our favorite and the most and the best solution to kind of present at the end of that phase. So who can help you in this phase? So in this phase, you can get the help of a model maker, and it's someone that's going to be very, very kind of crucial and vital when you start developing your project. They're essentially a really gifted craftsperson, and they can help you to translate your concepts from 2D into 3D. And that's a really kind of important stage to go through. We're obviously creating lots of 2D sketches and diagrams and what have you, but we don't really get a sense of it until we kind of bring it into reality. And they can help you to test how things work. They're very practical. They're functionally minded, so they can kind of help you to kind of figure those things out as well. And also, they can create some beautiful models that will help you to present your idea at the final phase. So why do we prototype our concepts? So we do it to get a better understanding of our concept. We also, we kind of do it so that we can improve and evolve our design and move it forward. And we do it to try to figure out any or develop any technical details. So whether that's mechanics, electronics, or software potentially, this phase is trying to kind of work those things out. It also helps us to evaluate the ergonomics and usability of our concept and our idea. And ergonomics is the process of designing products and services that are fit for that fit the people that use them. And as I said before, it's about turning the 2D into 3D. So we've highlighted that your projects fall into kind of two categories and two camps. There's the products that are the projects that are designed to create a physical product at the end of it, but then also there's the projects that are related to services, and they're including things like user or digital user experiences, like applications and things like that, but also kind of more system-based services. And within the prototyping phase, you're gonna kind of choose a slightly different method depending on those projects. So we split the next phase in the next kind of part of this presentation into two phases: the prototypes concentrating on products, and prototypes concentrating on services. So here we're just going to go through some examples of different methods you can use to prototype for a product. So the first one is a sketch model, and a sketch model is a great tool to use. It's essentially handmade models that are very quick and it's a very loose output as well. And they're usually using things that you can kind of find at home. So it's a great method to use currently in lockdown. So using things like foam, card, and paper, and they're there to essentially be a kind of a scale or kind of give a representation of scale or proportion and ergonomics to a certain extent as well. They really help you to solve the problem in 3D. It's a very explorative method, so it's often used kind of at an earlier phase. So it's often used in develop phase when you're actually coming up with ideas, and sometimes people actually start to design in 3D as opposed to starting with a piece of paper, because it allows them to get to grips with the material, and they're essentially kind of bringing their idea into kind of the 3D reality a lot earlier on in that stage. Another really good tool is 3D printing. And I'm guessing most of you are aware of what 3D printing is, and maybe even had a chance to use it and experiment with it. It obviously comes from it comes from a 3D CAD model that you've created. And it's a really accessible technology now. It didn't used to be. When I first started to become a designer, you wouldn't be able to 3D print your own objects at home. You'd have to rely on paying a lot of money to go to a professional company to do that. But with things like MakerBots, actually, it's something that some people do have access to in the home. And because it comes from 3D data and something that you've created on in your 3D package, the prototypes are very, very accurate. There are many different materials used now as well. So that's one of the kind of benefits of this material. Even with the plastic materials, you can have different colors, you can have different strengths, you can have different stiffnesses, You can have things that are better, actually kind of heat resistant. And actually now it's moved on so far that you can actually 3D print in metal now, metal compounds and alloys. But also someone has developed a ability to 3D print with concrete. And so they can actually create architectural structures and buildings with a 3D printing method. The one thing to notice, though, is, or to be aware of, is the time it takes to print. So it is a rapid prototype form. It can be very, very quick to print. But obviously, if you're creating a solid object, it's going to take a long time. As soon as you're laying down lots and lots of material, it's going to take a long, long time to print. So consider that when you're selecting this method, and especially when you start going kind of larger scale as well, it's going to have a massive impact on how long it takes to print. Functional prototypes are used to learn how your concept works, or try to figure out how your concept works. They're often trying to kind of use mechanical or electronic kind of principles to try to figure out, and they're about proving the principles. So they're not about how it looks. They're not about whether it looks realistic or consistent with your final design. It's actually about trying to work out, will it be achievable to work? So you often see things like the image here, like test rigs and kind of quite scientific looking models and mock-ups. And because of that, they often take quite a lot of planning. And because they take a lot of planning, they kind of often need to have a technical help to help you to actually create these prototypes. And because they're about trying to figure out how it actually works, it's actually quite difficult. There's often a lot of tweaking and iterations involved, and it does kind of often take quite a long time. And Dyson famously created thousands of functional prototypes before he even kind of settled on one that he was happy with. Another method we use is appearance models, and appearance models they essentially look like the end product. They look like the item that's going to be it's coming out of a factory and it's being produced. But they're often solid and they have no moving parts. And they're really good for testing the idea with users, and they're often used at the end of a design phase to present an idea to your client or whoever that may be. Because of the high level of craftsmanship required, they often do take the skills of a model maker to kind of make them successful. It's not a type of model that you'd be able to create yourself within a lockdown scenario. So we've covered some of the different prototyping methods for products. We now want to kind of touch on prototyping methods for services. And when we talk about services, we're talking about digital applications, things like mobile and web services. We're talking about kind of more environmental, physical services, but also then things like Uber, so things where it's actually kind of a system more than just a simple kind of application. So one of the type of prototypes we use in a digital context for digital applications like mobile and web is UX paper prototypes, and UX standing for user experience. And these help us to plan and kind of go through the interface workflow. They're really, really quick to iterate and to modify, and they're really low tech methods. So you can create one of these in your own home. And because it's a kind of a mapping type of exercise, and because it's moving away from a screen and kind of mapping out the entire interface on a wall potentially, or on the floor on a desk, it helps you to solve quite complex problems. And it's a very interactive method. You essentially can map out the entire interface, figure out kind of what buttons and what screens go where, and then you can kind of navigate and you can kind of interact with that screen as you work yourself through it. And you can change it as you go. So it's a really great kind of quick method for planning out the usability of your interface. And if we wanted to take that a step further, we use a method called digital UX prototypes. So these are a step up from paper, and they're often fully animated and interactive. And the difference between paper and these kind of interfaces is that they actually combine the graphic layout. So they combine exactly what the interface would look like: the colors, the graphics, the icons, and those kind of things. And using certain software tools, it does allow us to log the usability of these interfaces. So you could give it to someone, they could test it, they could use it, and then you'd kind of get essentially kind of a data readout of exactly how they used it, where they went wrong, where they kind of had some kind of issues with the interface itself. And like I say, there's lots of software tools available to allow you to do that. And some of them are unfortunately paid subscriptions, but there's a whole host of different things out there with different functionality. But there are low tech options, so you can potentially use static screens and actually put it together in a kind of PowerPoint animation or slideshow, and you can then walk someone through that journey by verbally explaining the interactions. So you don't actually have to have a fully interactive animated prototype. It can be slightly more kind of simplified if you don't have the facility to do that. When we kind of move into designing physical spaces and services that require people to move around environments, we use things called environmental mockups, and they're often a full scale environment. They help us kind of track the movement of a user within that space. And they allow us to understand any ergonomic considerations. So access, for instance, is enough space for someone to kind of move around in there in that way, but also kind of to consider design for disability as well, which is very important when we're talking about kind of public spaces. There can be quite a quick and low tech. If you've got the physical space, you can kind of map out quite simplified environments. But they do require physical space. So you've got to be aware that you've got to be able to realistically kind of move around to kind of get a true representation of what it would be like if you were to create this type of environment. And the final the final prototyping method that we use for services is desktop roleplay. And this is a great tool for mapping out quite large, complex systems. So something like, say for instance, you're trying to map out the experience of Uber. You've got to kind of try to lay that out in a kind of bit more of a broader sense, so you can kind of be almost role play and be that person going through that journey. And this is what this type of prototype allows you to do. It's very quick, it's low tech, it's kind of like a scale model of that system, so you can use Lego men or blocks or anything to represent the flow of the user through that journey. And it does allow you to kind of walk through that user journey and get a real sense of kind of what's going on. And because it's a walking through journey, it's kind of mapping movement, and it can map movement of people. It can map the movement of traffic, for instance, if you were creating something on a mass scale. Or it could allow you to track the movement of data. So, for instance, if you need to understand exactly kind of how data works within your system, this is a good method to use to track that. And because of its low tech nature, it's really quite quickly and easily modified. So you can kind of role play, test out a scenario, and then you can just tweak it and change it, and then get a sense of whether that's improving the journey and the design moving forward. So we've covered some different methods for both product and service, and now we kind of want to go through. We want to kind of talk about how to plan a prototype. And so we're going to ask you to actually create some prototypes, but within the session we've got an exercise to help you plan what to prototype. And how do we do that? So we need to choose an appropriate method to move forward with. So choosing one of the examples we talked through just now, we need to figure out what do we want to learn, who will interact with the prototype, what materials do you have accessible, and what expertise do you have to actually create that prototype. So this takes us on to the first task, and this task requires worksheet 6A and 6B. And what we want you to do is to spend 10 minutes to kind of fill out that worksheet. And ideally, it could be done. It was to be done with a group, so you could do it as a collective. But if you can't get access to kind of do that, then don't worry. You can kind of do it as an individual. And yeah, it's essentially a planning document to allow you to ask you the questions, all of the things that you might need to consider when actually prototyping your design. So some of the things you might need to think about is, what is the main function of the prototype? Who will interact with the prototype? What do you want to learn from the prototype? What materials do you have available, which is quite a crucial one in the current situation. And we've put in number 6, would you change your prototyping approach if lockdown wasn't taking place? So would it kind of change the way that you'd go about things? And finally, how would you need to modify or simplify your concept to be able to prototype it? The second sheet, 6B, which you want you to fill out, is a space to allow you to plan out, to sketch, to note down, to kind of figure out the finer details of your prototype. So yeah, please fill both worksheet 6A and 6B out, and you have 10 minutes to complete that. So if you set your timers, set your stopwatches 10 minutes, and if you pause me now, you can then crack on with the exercise. So hopefully you've gone through that exercise, and yeah, we've got a few examples here just to kind of talk through exactly kind of what we'd expect from that session. So my concept was about Ocean Hoover, and then the next 2 sheets go through exactly what I would be intending to prototype and who it's intended for, and then a sheet to explain exactly what type of prototype that would be. So the idea here was that I was going to prototype the Ocean Hoover, but I wanted to figure out the system itself and how it would operate, rather than kind of how the mechanics of the device works. It's how the whole system works. So I was going to do a desk role play exercise, mapping out how the system works, and kind of simplifying the components into Lego blocks, and really kind of walking through the process and the journey, and figuring out whether it's a kind of good idea or not, or whether it needs to be modified. So hopefully you've got you finished that, and you've got a great plan of action for kind of what you're going to prototype. And you could do that multiple times. So you don't need to create one prototype. You can create multiple prototypes, prototyping different things if you feel like you need to learn a little bit more. So we're now going to kind of assume that you've created a prototype, and now we're moving on to another step in the deliver phase. And that's all about user testing. So why do we conduct user testing? So it's going to help us to improve our design. We need to kind of test it, and user testing allows us to test it against the original brief. It also helps us to select the best solution moving forward. It helps us to validate our thinking. We've been so involved in this project. We need to kind of almost sense check it and pass it by a user to make sure that we are doing exactly kind of what we intended to set out to do. But it also allows us to collect data for client approval. So a lot of clients in kind of the industry and in the real world won't actually look to invest in a new project unless there's some kind of data that proves that it's doing the job it's intending to do, and that people think it's improving their lives. So we're just going to go through a few examples of different types of user testing. So the first one is focus groups, and focus groups are essentially an open discussion with a number of participants. So often 6 to 12 participants, and they often have a blend of personalities. And it's really important that you get the right dynamic in these kind of groups to make sure that you don't get too many people that try to take control of the conversation, or too many people that are not willing, are too shy and not willing to kind of give their opinion. So it's a delicate balancing act. And it's kind of often held in a research facility, and because of the nature of the conversation, we need someone to help us to moderate that and to kind of walk through it. So it's often conducted by a researcher, and because we are holding it in a often in a research facility, we don't necessarily want the whole design team to be in that room at the same time. It can be off-putting. It could apply too much pressure. We want to kind of create a nice, calm environment that allows people to give their honest opinion. So often, design team sits behind a two-way glass or two-way window to allow them to actually observe exactly what's going on. And you can actually achieve these without being in a research facility. You could potentially create a focus group kind of environment using a Zoom call or a house party or what have you. It's about trying to get people together and allow them to discuss the appropriateness of your design. And it's a really good way of getting a kind of a feeling or an overall sort of being an overall kind of quick litmus test of your the effectiveness of your design solution. So you're not going to get massive amounts of rich insight because it's a kind of a free-flowing conversation, but you are going to get you're going to get an overall feeling that your user groups that you intend to design for think that this is a successful product. There's also one-to-one interviews. So one-to-one interviews are a face-to-face discussion. They're often held in users' homes. We want to try to create a kind of really comfortable environment so that we get the best answers and the best feedback from users. So that's why they're often held in their homes. They're mainly moderated or conducted by a researcher and using a discussion guide to help them through that journey. So these are quite long conversations, and they are kind of a natural conversation. So we want to make sure that we cover all the ground, and that's where a discussion guide comes in to help us sort of structure that conversation. And again, because of the logistics and because it's not necessarily the most sort of inviting of environments, we don't want the whole design team to kind of take part in actually kind of listening in on this. So they're often filmed, and the design team can then kind of watch back later to see exactly what's happening. Because they're 1 to 2 hours often, and because you have to then travel to a user's home, and then because you have to then prepare quite a lot and write up all of the notes, they can be quite time consuming, but they do give you some really, really great insights, and it gets some really rich feedback from users. So it's a valuable tool to use. You just got to be mindful of how much time it can take. And the beauty of it is also that you can ask questions of the answers. So you can kind of delve a lot deeper using this method than many other methods. And the last type of, the last type of user testing we use is user surveys or questionnaires. So they're really good for large user samples. So if you want to try and kind of test your idea with lots and lots of people, this is a great way of doing it, because it can be completed remotely, which is great, especially considering in the times we're in now. There are lots of digital tools available as well that allow you to go out and compile a survey or a questionnaire, and then kind of ping it around, and then that software would then collate that data for you. They're relatively quick to produce, and there's lots of data to analyze, which can be very, very helpful. But the downside to that is that you don't get any kind of personal insights. You don't get any real kind of deep nuggets of feedback, which you can kind of then understand and kind of work into your design. A lot of the time it's kind of data heavy feedback. So we want to once you create prototypes and any other kind of materials that you might be using for user testing, we want you to go out and conduct that user testing. So first of all, we need to kind of plan how we're going to conduct it. So we need to choose an appropriate method, and that is dependent on the type of project you're doing, but also dependent on what you want to learn from it. And also then thinking about the kind of current situation, what is achievable for you to conduct. So what do we want to learn? So we've got to kind of look through that to make sure that we've given ourselves the best chance of getting that kind of feedback. Who are we going to speak to? How will we explain our idea? And what kind of questions will we ask the user when we're kind of going through this type of questioning? So I've got another task for you to complete. So this task is using worksheet A and worksheet B. And these are essentially some guidelines and some templates to help you plan out conducting effective user research. So again, we've got 10 minutes and we want you to fill out both these worksheets. We're assuming that actually the most appropriate method might be a questionnaire or user survey or an interview. But again, you can potentially hold focus groups if you think that's a good idea and you kind of want to do that. But just to kind of walk through the kind of information we're looking to put down here, we're looking to put down essentially kind of your concept title, but also what you want to find out about, who you're going to interview, what type of person, and do you have any specific people in mind? What do you have to communicate your ideas? So this is things like, do you have prototypes? Do you have sketches, photographs, diagrams? And do you need anything else to communicate your ideas? So it's important to realize that you're going to be kind of sharing a new, innovative idea with these people. They won't necessarily understand it straight away. So you need some kind of material or information to help explain that to them. And you might need to create some additional stuff. And you also need to think about how you describe that concept. You need to understand the type of person you're talking to and make sure you kind of frame it and put it in a language that they're going to understand. And the second sheet goes on to talk about or asks you to think about the actual specific questions you're going to ask. So we've broken this down as if you're talking to, as you're going to talk to an interviewee. So you need to, first of all, ask about themselves. You need to kind of use this as a way of creating a bit of an icebreaker and to give some context to the answers. You also then need to ask them about their thoughts on the original problem. So how do they feel about it? And do they feel the same as the design team? And does this make them an appropriate person to kind of evaluate your idea with? We need to then, we need to talk about your concept. So think about questions that really does ask of what they feel about your concept and whether they understand it. And then 4, we want to ask them about how you could improve your concept. So what kind of questions might you ask at this stage? So we've got 2 examples here, and these are examples that are available online, but you can kind of have a look here on the presentation as well. I'm going to, so you've got 10 minutes. If you set your timer now and then, crack on, and then you can pause me and then, start me again as soon as you're finished with these exercises. Great. So hopefully you've unpaused me and you've completed those exercises. Again, it'd be really useful if you are struggling, please go and look at those examples, because it gives you a bit of a sense of what kind of questions I would ask if I was going through this journey. And again, with all of the examples, it's with that same project in mind. Right. So you've conducted, you've completed those exercises, and you've planned exactly kind of what you're going to test and how you're going to go about it. So just want to kind of cover what the things we'd really like you to do after the session. And these are things that would essentially help you complete your workbook and essentially move your project forward and really refine exactly kind of what your concept is. So it'd be great if you can use worksheet 6 to complete and create a prototype, and then use all your planning exercises to conduct some user testing to figure out exactly what's going on with what your users think of your design, and then maybe even kind of use that feedback to improve it. That's a fantastic kind of loop that we kind of want you to follow to kind of bring those insights and that feedback and kind of move your concept forward. So great. So we've covered a lot in this session, but also over the 2 sessions that you've been with me. And I just want to kind of recap exactly what we have been through. So we've been through the entire journey of the design process. So we've framed your design problem. We've discovered more about your users. We've defined a design brief. We've developed ideas and concepts. And we've delivered prototypes and user testing. And hopefully it gives you the best possible chance of selecting a single solution to present as part of your workbook submission. So it's been a really enjoyable couple of sessions, and I hope you've had a really good week and you've enjoyed the process and you've learned a lot about the different skills and tools available to help you to move your project along. So unfortunately, you won't have any opportunity to ask questions at this stage, but hopefully you were on the session so that you were able to ask any questions. But it's just want to say thanks for joining us and joining us for the product development workshop. And I really look forward to seeing some of your submissions and hope that those projects really do kick on and you're proud of what you create. So thanks very much, everyone. And I'll see you later. Thanks. Bye-bye.